several announcements to make, so I'd better get them out of the way early. First and foremost, there is, of course, a live video stream of this broadcast that you can find at our website, kojoshow.org. So you can watch the entire broadcast even as you listen from there. That's at our website, kojoshow.org. There you will be able to see Tom Sherwood. He's our resident analyst and a reporter for NBC4. He's also a columnist for the current newspapers. Tom Sherwood, welcome.
Good afternoon.
Do you know that you will be participating in a mayoral candidates debate on October 2nd?
I was just hearing that, first of all, thank you for the invitation to participate. I was just hearing about it. It sounds terrific and a great thing for where you're going to announce the location, I hope.
The invitation did not come from me. I was trying to get you prohibited from participating in the debate, but my opinion held no sway. It will be taking place on Thursday, October 2nd. It will be airing live in prime time that evening. It will be taking place at NPR headquarters. Information will be made available in the coming days about how to obtain tickets, so you should stay tuned for more details. And we were expecting today to be interviewing Rushern Baker, the county executive of Prince George's County, Maryland, but he had a personal emergency and was unable to make it. And instead, Angela also Brooks has stepped up. She is the state's attorney for Prince George's County. She has agreed to fill in. I am tempted to say thank you for kindly agreeing to fill in, but if I say that, people will think that this is going to be a softball interview, in which we're so grateful for you coming here that we only throw softball questions at you.
And we would never think that, not ever.
Well, we're glad you showed up anyway. If you have questions or comments for Angela also Brooks, you can call 800-433-8850 or send email to kojo@wamu.org. We usually begin, Tom and I, with discussing a few other topics. You can feel free to jump in as we discuss those topics. Tom, I'd like to start with the trial that is currently taking place in Virginia and then move on to a story that you broke this week, the trial of the former governor of Virginia and his wife, which is attracting a lot of attention, less for the criminal evidence that is being seen in the case and more because of the, how can I say that, weird personal relationship that is beginning to be exposed here.
Well, I don't know how many people want their domestic relationships exposed in a trial, but the governor, Petula Dvorak on the Washington Post wrote an interesting article. I never say her name correctly, I apologize, but she wrote a very interesting article about the governor basically throwing his wife under the bus. I was telling somebody out there in the newsroom, Marion Barry sees the line about somebody setting you up and can't quite say it on the radio, but it's really unseemly. It's I don't know. I've seen the pictures of the governor with the Rolex, and he complained that it was heavy on his wrist. Well, then why'd you wear it? I've seen him say, well, I just happened to be driving a Ferrari back as a favor. Well, you should see the look on his face as he's driving that Ferrari. He looks like he's in high heaven. So it's just unseemly, and clearly the marriage is bad, but let's just assume it's all true, and I'd love to hear the prosecutor's view on this. I don't care how bad your marriage is and how bad your communications are. That doesn't mean that you can violate possibly the laws of influence peddling, and that seems what the charge is against him. And he can't say, well, I didn't talk that well with my wife, so therefore I didn't know this was all improper.
As a prosecutor, do you find this defense a little kind of unusual, to say the least?
I think it's a little unusual. I do. I think I agree with Tom that, no matter the state of the marriage, that there is a certain level of honor that you owe the people you represent, and you still have no right to violate laws because of the state of your family affairs. People expect you to act with integrity no matter what. And I think it's a strange defense, but we'll see what the jurors think.
The judge is being cited for his patience in listening to all of this, because one assumes what's going through his and a lot of people's mind is, who wants to hear this stuff?
Was he the judge that said early on, we are going to adjourn this because this is all I can stand for the day?
Yes,
Wasn't that the same judge?
I think it was the same.
That was pretty good. But just that, the gifts the McDonald accepted. Now yesterday, he basically said that the $15,000 wedding gift for his daughter's wedding was okay, but he thought the $1,000 golf club trip maybe was too much. And now he also, looking, I think, for sympathy from the jury, said, he has moved out of the governor's mansion and is living in the Catholic rectory with Catholic priests. So I
thought that was a nice touch.
You know, it only makes me wish I were still in Richmond so I could be in the courtroom, because I would like to see the face of the judge as he's listening to all
and
this.
I would love to see you reporting on it if you were indeed covering it.
And let's just, you know, don't forget we are now in the defense phase. He's presenting his defense, and then the prosecutors will be allowed to ask a question or two.
And we'll be awaiting that when it happens. Tom, you broke the story about the IRS going to Park Southern Apartments and seizing some of its financial records. What's that all about?
Well, the important thing here, this is the case of the low-income Southern Avenue Park Southern apartment complex, 700 low-income or no-income tenants. It's gotten mixed up in the mayor's race because allegations from David Catania, that the candidate for mayor, that Muriel Bowser, the Democratic nominee, has sided more, as her role in the council, has sided more with the discredited and displaced managers of that place rather than the tenants. But what we learned this week was that the IRS criminal division, not just some IRS agents, but the criminal division of IRS, went in and took on August 12th 10 years of records of that complex, trying to sort out where millions of dollars have gone. And what does that mean for the mayor's race? I think it just adds more fuel that this was a badly run operation, maybe for a long time, but we'll see as more information comes out. There are FOI requests out by several news organizations. There's more investigation. Was there any politics involved in this? Because the people who mismanaged the department also were strong supporters of Muriel Bowser. And she's told me as recently as yesterday, she has done nothing about this. She's the one that called for the Inspector General investigation when the Post did all these stories about it. But it's just the taint of bad management, bad politics around this. And so it will be in her interest for it all to be cleared up.
As the newspaper said, it's the closest thing to a scandal in her campaign at this point. But of course, the 700 residents of that building are the ones who are really the victims in all of this.
Yes, I went out there, and I talked to one young man. He told me about how his grandmother had lived to be 100, and she had lived there for many years, and he had lived there for 7 years. And I said, well, and he talked about the pool in the back. That's not a luxury, during the hot summer, low-income people, there's no rec center near there necessarily. So there's a pool there. It's empty at a time when children and older people can relax. Not some luxury swimming pool, just a little pool. I mean, the city's doing a lot more to fix it, and they're spraying for bugs. It's rat infested. They're fixing locks. But a lot more needs to be done, and we just need to know how we got to this point.
And, of course, when we're talking about Park Southern, that's as close to Prince George's County as you can get in the District of Columbia. So
it's right across the street.
We make the transition now to talking about Prince George's County. In case you're just joining us, our guest is Angela Also Brooks. She is the state's attorney for Prince George's County. And we'll take your calls, questions for her at 800-433-8850. You can send email to kojo@wamu.org or go to our website, kojoshow.org, and watch a live video stream of this broadcast where you can see Tom Sherwood's wonderfully handsome face there. That would be the other Tom Sherwood, not this one. And Angela Also Brooks is in studio with us. Everybody's hearts go out to the families of Layla Miller and Kanija Bibb, two young people who were both killed in Prince George's County. But it seems that the focus here, both in these killings and in your focus generally, is on domestic violence in Prince George's County. Talk about that.
It is, and speaking of family, before I begin, if you'd allow me, I want to just offer my thoughts and prayers. The county executive was going to be here today. His wife is an absolutely wonderful lady, and he was caring for her today, so I want to just offer my thoughts and prayers there. It is all about family and about family violence. What we've noticed in our county is all other crimes are declining. And it makes it difficult for us to turn our faces away from the fact that the predominant violence in our county right now is happening in the family. About 40% of our homicides this year are domestic. That's alarming.
How many, what percent?
40%.
40%.
Wow.
Of the homicides this year are domestic in nature. And what that tells us is that our law enforcement efforts are effective. Because strangers are declining, the violence there. But what we're noticing now is this is an issue that has to be resolved in our families and in our communities, because we're arresting these folks as soon as the crimes are committed. We're preparing to sentence today Mr. Kugler, a guy who killed his girlfriend. We arrested within 24 hours. The police are excellent. We convicted Mr. Kugler right away. We're convicting. But arresting and convicting, that cycle is not enough if this violence continues to escalate in our families, and we're gonna do something about it.
Or exactly what can you do about it?
You know, we focus, I think, in the places where it matters. Family matters, and we have to talk more openly about mental health and what that means, not only in this community but all across the state. We look in other jurisdictions where we are seeing the increase in killing of children, for example. We have so many instances of that. We had the two ladies at the top of the year who killed those 1 and 2 year old, a mother who killed a 1 and 2 year old child. So we're seeing mental health as that unaddressed kind of issue that has been shameful to many people. But talk about it more openly. How do we get help for families who are stressed out now, who are not seeking help where it's needed? So we have to really focus on making sure resources are available to the whole family.
When you had your press conference at the scene of the shooting, which is Johnny Parker from the First Baptist in Glen Arden, was talking about how men, African-American men, but all men need to channel violence, channel their aggressive tendencies. He says, you're taught to be strong and muscles, and you ought to have a strong mind, too, to fight these things. This sounds like a whole different thing rather than law enforcement. This sounds like community building as opposed to law enforcement.
It is. And you know what? The press conference we hosted Monday was intentionally held in the neighborhood where Layla was abducted and then killed, because the point is this issue will not be addressed solely in our courthouses or police stations. This is something the community has to be involved in, and that's the reason that we hosted it there. But in addition to that, we have to have a different conversation about domestic violence. We always talk about the women who are victims of the crime, and I think we have to continue to support them, but we have to include men in these conversations as well and say we not only offer resources and help for women who have been victimized, but let's talk about the aggressors. Let's talk about how we offer help to them in a voice that they can accept.
Because I got to tell you, Layla Miller's father, Frederick Miller, the one who eventually killed her and shot her grandparent and great-grandparents, I saw interviews in which a number of his family members said, yes, well, he'd been having problems with custody for a while. Yes, he'd been worried for a while. And I sensed that behind those comments was an understanding that he was having some mental issues that were not being addressed. And you mentioned it earlier, there is a cultural problem here. In the African-American community, there's a stigma about admitting to any form of mental illness or any form of need for psychological counseling, because the notion is that you're crazy and people will begin to either disassociate themselves with you or disregard you. That's the problem you're going to have to deal with.
And you look weak.
Yeah. Exactly. And you know what? And that's precisely the problem, especially with men. You know, saying to a man that you're weak if you ask for help. We have to really change this whole thought process and now say there is no weakness in saying I cannot handle the set of circumstances I'm facing. If it is a loss of job, if it is stress in a relationship, those things are playing themselves out in our family in very catastrophic ways. So offering help to the women who are in these relationships, the children, because we also find that these are cyclical sorts of situations. Many of these men have witnessed this violence in their homes as children. So we have to do a better job of protecting our children from it and providing the help that is needed for men, and saying to men that we have an open line of communication for you to reach out to us before you react violently.
You mentioned the 40% figure, but we've had family stress, we've had unemployment, we've had racial discrimination, we've had isolation, we've had all of these things for decades. Is there any unifying aspect of why it seems to be having more domestic violence now than we've had in the past? Is it better accounting for it? I don't know. It just seems like a great deal, and I've heard all the reasons for decades.
You know, and that's what we have to get to the bottom of. I think that is a good question. It's one that we have to now, we're forced to explore. I think almost the fact that these other crimes have declined and now what's left is something that we can no longer kind of put a blinder over, is whatever dysfunction, and I'm using the word dysfunction, the dysfunction that exists in our families, we can no longer ignore. It's killing us and killing for generations. Our future.
Then you got started. I think I read something. You got started actually in domestic violence as
Sure
part
did.
of your initial career. How many years ago was
That's
that?
still a focus.
Hey, 1997 was when I started as the
Almost
first
20 years.
Exactly, and you know what? A lot of the patterns are continuing. Although, in this last year, many of the cases we saw, this was interesting to us. involved men who had no involvement whatsoever in the system. These were not repeat offenders. These were explosive sorts of responses. And so it tells us that something different is happening, and we have to get to the bottom of it.
A lot of people have been paying close attention to what's been happening in a county halfway across the country from where you are lately, the county in Missouri, where the death of a young black man in an officer-related shooting has sparked protests and very controversial responses from law enforcement. How does a prosecutor, because there are a great deal of calls in this case from people who are protesting for the arrest of the police officer involved in this deadly shooting, how does a prosecutor proceed with investigating and ultimately maybe charging a police officer? Is that any different from how you would proceed from a citizen who is not?
Well, I think the prosecutor in this job is doing the right thing in terms of opening a grand jury investigation. I understand that they started accepting testimony in that grand jury as early as this past Wednesday, and that they will therefore be seeking, I hope, an indictment at some point if that's what the evidence points to. But they're hearing from witnesses in that grand jury who will decide whether to return an indictment.
But there's also the criticism that the prosecutor controls the grand jury process, that the defense, that the victim or the defense has no representative in that hearing, or the defense in this case has no representative in that hearing, and so the prosecutor really controls everything.
That the cliche is that a prosecutor can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich because it is the beginning of the process.
Yeah.
It is, and you know what? And I can only hope. I know that there have been concerns around the prosecutor's inability to be impartial because his own father was killed
as a
police officer when he was 12. But I also read that there are a good number of people who say this is a man of integrity. He has been elected by this very same community, I think, in at least 3 elections. And so I believe the people there have expressed some confidence in him. He was most recently reelected, I think, August 5th. So it is our hope that he will be that he will use his integrity and will return a fair. He will be fair in that grand jury, and that what happens there, I mean, it will go a long way toward healing this community that is expressing through this outrage their mistrust of this
What would
leadership.
it take for you as a prosecutor to recuse yourself from a trial or from a case?
I think that you look at the facts and circumstances, and if there is any doubt that you can be fair, I think you have an affirmative obligation to remove yourself. So the questions that were raised in this case, a person who suffered great injury himself as a 12-year-old, watching his father, the results of his father's murder. If he believed, for example, that would make him unable to be fair in this case, I think he'd have an obligation to recuse himself.
There's less respect for the response from the Ferguson police force. Both conservatives and liberals, clearly across the spectrum, have been worried about the militarization of police in the kind of equipment and the heavy-handed reaction to nonviolent protests there. I know that Prince George's County has some of the powerful equipment that from the Homeland Security you can get it pennies on the dollar, or you can get it free. Do you have any concerns seeing that specific instance about the over-militarization of our police forces?
I think it's
or is it just a matter of how you use the equipment you have?
Yeah, I think it's how you use the equipment you have, and in this case, I think that obviously these tensions have existed for so long in this community. That the response used by police, and maybe, it's hard to gauge when you're not on the ground, you're not the person having bottles thrown at you and, and such. But I think that the real problem here is the poor relationship that exists and the tensions that have to have existed over decades in this particular community to see this situation evolve the way it has. And so it's not necessarily the equipment, but there is a real lack of relationship here, you can tell, and that really is the crux of the issue there.
Chief Kathy Lanier, in talking to NBC4 this week to Mark Seagrave, said, we have a lot of mean equipment that we have for the worst possible things that may happen, but she said our judgment is when to use it. You don't bring it out on demonstrations. Remember, we had the Occupy Wall Street demonstrations and things like that, and you have to manage those things, not try to snuff them out.
In our communities, I think Prince George's, the police, for example, I think have done a great job of building community relationships. It makes it difficult to act out in that way against people who you have genuine relationships with.
What about having police officers wear cameras?
What do you think about that?
wear cameras?
Yeah, there are some police forces that are now. I'm sorry, I can't recall them, where they will wear GoPro style cameras on their vest and turn them on whenever they're interacting with anybody.
An increasing number of police departments.
And then some people have discussed it.
I think the video cams that we've seen and the other use of technology has been very helpful.
Many officers have those.
They have been very helpful. I think we have found them to be extremely helpful in gathering information about how these situations started and about it really does alleviate questions that may arise later. So I think the cameras have been extremely effective. They have been especially helpful to us as prosecutors as we build cases and review cases.
I just worry about the number of police officers who do their jobs every day, as you would recognize, and how they would feel that I have to wear a camera because there's some bonehead person who has done something stupid. I just don't know what we say to our police forces. Why don't we let the firefighters do it, see if they respond properly? Why don't we put them on journalists to see how we behave? I just worry about it as a kind of a mindset in our community, if that's what we think we have to wire our police to be on
and not
camera.
done for that reason, but to protect them. I think these cameras provide for us a lot of protection for defendants in many cases who would have alleged abuse. Well, we have the cameras rolling, we can see exactly what occurred, and in many cases it provides protection to police officers who would have otherwise been wrongly accused.
One more question about prosecuting police officers. You, as a prosecutor, have to work very closely with police. You depend on them to gather evidence. You depend on police to testify when you're prosecuting cases. How difficult does that make it to prosecute a police officer? Because obviously you don't want that prosecution to cause broader tensions between your office and the police department.
It's very difficult. I can tell you that we take no pleasure in having to prosecute police officers.
You've done it.
We have done it. We've prosecuted quite a few, and what we've heard from the police, including the leadership there, is that they don't support officers who have broken the law either, and that it makes it more difficult for them to continue the great work they do if they have officers who have committed offenses and are not held accountable. And so they support in the case, and we have to point out always that it is the 1% who steps over that line and who does and who will break the law. But when they do, we have an obligation to correct it so that we don't lose the very delicate trust that the public has for us. And that trust is extremely important.
Our guest is Angela Also Brooks. She's the state's attorney for Prince George's County, Maryland. She joins us in studio. Questions or comments for her, 800-433-8850. You can send email to kojo@wamu.org. You know, when Tom and I look at you from our generational perspective, we feel that you grew up listening to go-go music. So Tom has a question for you along that line.
Well, just this afternoon, Mayor Gray here in the city did the Chuck Brown Park dedicated, spent $1 million on it. There's a new album out, a posthumous album out by Chuck Brown.
Tom showing how hip he is.
All right.
I just know that I'm up to speed on things. And I have tapped my foot to a go-go tune or so.
That's all he can do.
But in your county, there's the post I had front page Metro story, I think, today, that a man who was convicted in a crime has discovered he cannot open a go-go club. You guys had terrific troubles with go-go clubs. They're gone now, basically. What is this story about? He says he's a legitimate businessman now. He wants to open this. He's invested in the go-go club. Now he's told by the law he can't because of his previous crimes.
I think Kojo.
Where's go-go?
You know what? I think Kojo's right. I attended Banneker Senior High School right here in the city, and so I grew up in that generation where we enjoyed go-go music. I've attended concerts and such. But what we are concerned about now is our quality of life. The issue for us is that we believe that the quality of life of the people we represent is far more important than anything. We protect businesses. We are pro-business in the county. We want that to be abundantly clear. But no individual has the right to open any business that interrupts the quality of life of the people who live there. What we found with these clubs is that we were attracting violence. We have now statistical information that shows us the very dramatic decline in crimes in the neighborhoods where we were able to shut down some of these clubs. And I want to compliment Councilwoman Toll. She's taken a lot of hits over this, a lot of heat over this, but she has stood tall for the people of our county. She is unapologetic about it. We had our non-fatal shootings decline by about a third in the neighborhoods where we were able to shut down some of these clubs. We had vandalism. We had other crimes that occurred as the clubs would let out. We had a young woman shot in the head in a club, MSG, by owners who had three different owners for the three. They opened the club under three different names. The violence continued. They did nothing. We went in, we shut it down, and that's to me that is the right result. Again, we have to protect the way of life of the people who live there. We're not anti-business. As long as your business doesn't interrupt the quality of life, we're supportive.
There's a go-go event tonight at Howard Theater, with the restored place here in Shaw neighborhood,
featuring the Chuck Brown Band.
Right, and I just want that. The people who like go-go music should use that as an opportunity to express the love of the music in Chuck Brown. I just hope that's what happens.
And I love the music. I like the music as well. I've attended Chuck Brown concerts, but I don't want people to live in their homes and be imprisoned by the violence that lets out. And as long as we can do so peacefully, we're
I don't know that you have any role in this, but the Seat Pleasant mayor,
Eugene Grant.
Is there any legal issue there about him being denied access to his government facilities? Have you even gotten involved with this at all? You're paying attention to it?
You know what? I haven't. I've had my hands full, but I do know Mayor Grant, and
everybody.
And I hope
has he ever fussed at you?
No, he hasn't. And let me tell you, and he's not a quiet man. So if he had, you would know all about it.
Well, I like him already. I hadn't personally met him, but he's not a quiet man.
I have known him for years. He's not a quiet man. There are political questions for you. Someone wants to know, who are you supporting for governor in the election upcoming in Maryland?
And you're unopposed on your race, right? You're just coasting to re-election.
Well, you know what? I don't know if it's coasting because we still went out to campaign, but I am so proud to support Anthony Brown for governor. We are proud that he's a Prince Georgian. And that we are really happy to have a voice, a native Prince Georgian, well, not native, but a Prince Georgian to be in that governor's mansion. And we are hopeful that he will continue to not only support the people of our state, but we expect that he will be a wonderful supporter of Prince George's County, education dollars, public safety dollars. He's been a great partner for us in domestic violence. This is an issue that is near and dear to him. Since Anthony Brown, over the last few years, he's helped us to secure $3 million additional dollars to fight violent repeat offenders in Prince George's County. So he's been a wonderful partner, and we are happy to support him.
Rushern Breaker, is my understanding, is also unopposed in his race for state's attorney, but he is term limited, and inquiring minds wants to know if at some point that would be on your agenda, running for county executive in Prince George's County.
Well, you know what? They say you get one job at a time, and I
have.
You know what?
We have a list of about 7 or 8 interests that we just will not allow.
And
I'm focused on my job. Well, how about this?
There we
then?
go.
Would you, if it's, what would you support changing the law that would allow him to run for a 3rd term?
I think that, first of all, the county executive, I think, has done a wonderful job, and I think that he's been a wonderful partner. And you know what? I think that if the people decide that they extend the term, I think he's done a wonderful job. He really has been a wonderful.
All right, put on your headphones because Ian in Gaithersburg, Maryland, has a question. Ian, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Great, thank you. Earlier there was the question about militarization of police forces, and you didn't seem to think that that was too big of an issue around here. But one thing that is being reported across the country is the use of SWAT teams, in particular, being more and more common for things that would normally be so routine as serving a search warrant. And these have caused issues. There was a report not too long ago of a 2-year-old boy who had a flashbang grenade land in his crib. Locally, it was only a few years ago that a SWAT team busted into the home of the mayor of Berwyn Heights,
Mayor Calvo,
and slaughtered his 2 pet dogs.
That was from the sheriff's department.
From that aspect of militarization, what is your perspective on the growing use of SWAT teams?
Angela also, bro.
I think that we can never forget that all of our police departments work to serve the people. And I think that anything that becomes intrusive to people in their homes, we have to look at. But most of these issues, to me, strike me as training issues, including what happened in Berwyn Heights and in some of these other issues around the country. is that it really does scream training, and that although we have this equipment available to us, the good discretion as to when to use it, and I don't pretend to substitute my judgment for the judgment of any officer who would find themselves in these very dangerous situations. They are very dangerous situations. We are aware of that. But I think that, just really emphasizing training so that the discretion is used as to when to use them or not would be very important.
I think the caller raises something I hear a lot when I go around town is that people worry about cowboy cops who just get out of control in circumstances. They brandish these major weapons in minor situations, and you can incite something as much as calm it down if you're just not careful how you use it. Even if your training says don't do it.
The SWAT team in Florida that descended on a barber shop.
You remember the people throwing the snowballs at DuPont Circle, and an officer got a plainclothes, just put out a gun, not a major militarization, but put out a gun, and people wonder what is the officer thinking?
Yeah, I think it's possible to diffuse many of these situations without all of these tanks and such that we've seen. In fact, we review cases in our office every week, and I remember remarking one day this week about an officer who completely disarmed an individual who was armed. Nobody was hurt, nobody was shot. That's good police work. Can't happen in every instance. And again, I can't substitute. I'm not there in those dangerous situations, but I think it's possible through effective training to train officers to respond in some of these situations without the use of this very heavy machinery that
because it's dangerous work. That's why the training is so important.
Afraid we're just about out of time. Angela also Brooks, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Do we have time for one more question?
Oh, of course, you always do.
Casino. Baltimore is opening its big casino right downtown. You're going to have a casino in Prince George's County. What, 2 more years I think it takes to construct? That's such a big deal.
Yeah.
What about policing for something like that? That's big time crime opportunities. And we heard those horrible stories in Maryland Live of people who leave their children in the cars while they go gamble, and they leave some elderly mother. Are you planning ahead for that?
We're going to have to work very closely with Milt Peterson and the others over at National Harbor to make sure that we don't see a repeat of the situations you've noted, parents leaving children in cars, and some of the other things that can arise that affect families, quite honestly. Once again, as we talk about the stress and pressure of the various failed financial situations in families, what about this? We're going to have to really make sure we keep our eyes open.
Seniors who win money are subject to scams, or just a number of things.
Yeah, we're going to have to.
It's on your radar.
It is on our radar for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Angela also Brooks, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
This is the Politics Hour. Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's a reporter for NBC4, a columnist for the current newspapers. Tom, the disciplinary action was handed down to the firefighters who were involved or not involved in helping Medrick Cecil Mills back in January. He died right across the street from a fire station on Rhode Island Avenue Northeast. Nobody is going to be fired. One firefighter went to his bunk to study for promotional exam. He's going to be given a 60-day suspension. A second firefighter will be given a reprimand. The officer who was in charge of that station retired and avoided punishment completely. There is outrage being expressed here by everybody from the mayor, but especially by the family of Mr. Mills. You wonder, how could somebody die right outside a fire station after asking for help, not get it, and nobody gets fired? What kind of town is this?
Well, what that says is that everyone is guilty. The mayor says, quote, justice was not done. Mayor Gray said that. The acting fire chief has expressed concern. The trial board, the three-person trial board, looked at this, said the evidence, closed some of the hearings. Initially we were going to have reporters in the room for those hearings, and they weren't there. And so if there's any, we don't want another victim to be the citizens who find out that we don't have a fair and open disciplinary system. People are entitled to be represented by lawyers and to have their say. But in this case, people feel that justice wasn't done, and if the system needs to be changed to make sure that justice is done, maybe that's where we ought to go.
Special election has given Republicans control of the Virginia Senate. Republican Benton Chafin Jr. won the state Senate seat. On Tuesday, it secures GOP control of the General Assembly, making life probably a little more difficult for Democratic Governor Terry McAuliffe. the defeated Democrat Mike Hines. The seat, of course, to replace that of Senator Philip Puckett, who was a Democrat who abruptly resigned in June and changed everything.
Well, this is bad for the Democrats in Virginia. They now will not control either house of the General Assembly. The House is firmly Republican. It's bad news for Governor McAuliffe. He's had difficulty. I give him great credit for trying very hard to work with the Republicans. But now working with the Republicans may mean more compromising with Republicans as he gets into his next General Assembly session. We still don't know. Philip Puckett, the state senator from the Roanoke area, who kind of set this in motion when he quit with the expectation of getting a great appointment, a well-paid job. I think Tobacco Commission, wasn't it? I didn't write it down. I think it's Tobacco Commission. And his daughter was en route to be a judge. That's still being investigated by criminal and prosecutorial folks about whether there are any quid pro quos there. But this election shows that the Republicans are in strong control in the state of Virginia on state house matters.
Joining us by phone now is Adam Ebbin. He's a member of the Virginia Senate. He's a Democrat who represents the Commonwealth's 30th District, which includes parts of Alexandria, Arlington, and Fairfax counties. Senator Ebbin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We have often talked about the genteel nature of politics in Virginia, and in other jurisdictions, what happened with Senator Puckett would have led to throwing of chairs and screaming and maybe even some fisticuffs. What was your own response to this development?
Well, we haven't thrown any chairs, but we haven't been in session since this special election took place on Tuesday. We haven't met. The Senate won't be back till September 18th or 19th. But I really was disappointed in what a lot of us consider a betrayal. Senator Puckett had assured us privately, our Democratic caucus, that he intended to fill out his term when there were rumors earlier in the session. It doesn't pass the smell test, but it's something we're going to have to live with, having a Republican control of the Senate. We take some consolation in the fact that the governor's vetoes are unlikely to be overridden by the Senate anytime soon.
Well, betrayal is the strongest word we've heard.
What does it mean in terms what does it mean for like committee chairs in the 40-member Senate? If the Republicans control, does that mean the Democrats are now all relegated to secondary positions on those committees?
That's correct. When we met in March, I believe it was, we had Republicans seize control kind of prematurely. It was a 2019 majority they had then. Now they'll have 21-19. But they did reassign the committees and committee chairs.
What did that mean for you personally? Were you a committee chair?
I'm not a committee, was not a committee chair, but it means that instead of being on 4 committees, I'll be on 3. And that when we took control, I was moved over to the Commerce and Labor Committee, which is important to me for clean energy and working people. And then also I was on the Privileges and Elections Committee. But I'll still serve on 3 committees, being local government, conservation and natural resources.
And I know that we want to get to the same-sex decision-making in Virginia,
but anyway, I won't be a committee chair.
Okay, correct. Not anytime soon. But I want to ask you about the Commonwealth of Virginia and the image of the state and your concerns, or feelings, both personal and political, about what's happening to Governor McDonald there in Richmond in the court.
Well, personally, it's sad. It's sad to see, and it's sad for the Commonwealth. He had an image as a real law and order guy, good government, and to see what he what has apparently happened with his relationship with one person seeking special favors. The jury, has yet to rule, but it doesn't look good for him, particularly not for his wife as well. But when you have a scandal that affects one elected official, people tend to associate all of us with that kind of bad behavior, and I intend to introduce some additional ethics legislation this coming session that wouldn't have bearing on the federal charges, but we need to tighten things up.
Do you want to comment at all on how the governor has laid the great blame of all this on his wife?
Yeah, I've known her for a number of years as well, and this is not something she signed up for. But when someone hands you a $5,000 Rolex, you need to ask questions, and he was involved in seeking loans from someone who he's doing product launches for in the executive mansion and so forth. So I fault them both, but I don't really want to comment on the state of their marriage, but I don't think that that's what needs to be aired in court, and that seems to be his strongest defense, is to blame his wife.
Okay, let's go on then to marriage in the
Supreme
state.
Court this week put the brakes on Virginia issuing licenses for same-sex marriages, which a lower court ruling had cleared the way for the Commonwealth to do by declaring Virginia's ban on same-sex marriage unconstitutional. What do you expect is going to happen next? You are among those who is supportive of same-sex marriage becoming legal in Virginia.
That's right. Well, I think the Supreme Court will clearly take up the issue of marriage equality in the next term, and but with federal courts consistently ruling that that there's a constitutional right to marriage for adults, I'm hopeful that that we'll see marriage everywhere in the country.
When the next term is that October? When do we?
That's October. I believe it's the first Wednesday in October or first Monday in October.
Is that when the court announces which cases it's going to take in the coming term, or when will we know whether or not it takes it?
I'm not certain. I think it would. They can still announce even during session that they're taking up additional cases, but I would expect to hear that, if not on the first in the beginning of October, then shortly thereafter.
Some people were surprised that the Attorney General Mark Herring, who would not defend the law, saying it was unconstitutional, did agree that the court should put a delay on the Fourth Circuit's ruling, so the Supreme Court would take up the case. Why didn't he just let it go forward like it happened in California, California or Utah? I can't remember which, where the marriages could go forward.
And did you have any conversations with him about that strategy?
Not directly with his staff, but I think that his concern was that if marriages took place and things happened like joint parent adoptions and others, and then the court were to rule that marriage was not guaranteed by the Constitution, that there could be some people left in legal limbo, and that he thought the court would decide eventually anyway. But I would have preferred to see equality granted to people from the entire Fourth Circuit, but I recognize his cautionary nature.
We're talking with Adam Eben. He's a member of the Virginia Senate. He's a Democrat representing the Commonwealth's 30th District. If you have questions or comments for Senator Eben, give us a call at 800-433-8850 or send email to kojo@wamu.org. Senator Eben, it was only in 2006, 8 years ago, that this constitutional ban was approved by voters in Virginia. Do you feel that the public in the Commonwealth is somehow in a different place now? And if so, how do you explain that?
Well, I think that public opinion has shifted rapidly, as seen by opinion polls, and that people see 6 years ago, I don't think we had anyone but perhaps Massachusetts with marriage equality, and people see that the sky has not fallen on people for having legal rights coming with marriage. I think that 2006 was a snapshot in time, and that the Republicans really rushed and pushed hard to get that on the ballot quickly, knowing that it wouldn't last forever. The willingness of the people of Virginia to be scared into voting for that amendment. It was the first time the Virginia Bill of Rights had been amended to take away rights. In fact, our entire Constitution in 400 years, and it's difficult to repeal it on the ballot, particularly with the nature of the gerrymandered conservative House of Delegates.
And now we have 19 states in the District of Columbia, I believe, now have same-sex marriage as part of the law. And there have been, 25 court cases or 26, all of which have ruled in favor of same-sex marriage. I mean, if you were in the National League, you'd be winning the World Series on the issue. But how certain, how confident, how worried are you about this matter finally going to the U.S. Supreme Court?
Well, I'd like to have lunch with Justice Kennedy, but I don't know him. I think that he's the key. I mean, I think we know that based on the other two decisions, that 4 of the justices would favor full marriage equality, and that Justice Kennedy was not ready then to grant it to everyone. And I think with the tide of public opinion that that the court may well that should rule for marriage equality, but it's hard to read his mind.
Senator Abbott, go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say this. Your comment earlier, the sky has not fallen, at least not yet, might be a persuasive thought for the justice.
I think that'll be influencing, and I think also his concern when in the last 2 cases about the children of same-gender, same-sex couples, that their rights were directly impacted by not having legal marriage for their parents in the states that were discussed in the previous cases.
What do you say to people who firmly, the owners of the Hobby Lobby, for example, but people who so firmly in their cultural or religious beliefs just think that this is the wrong thing to do? What is your response to them?
Well, regarding marriage, what I often say is that your religion has the freedom not to marry anyone, and that no one has ever sued the Catholic Church or successfully sued the Catholic Church in court to require people who were previously divorced to be married or otherwise, and that my religion or all faith traditions should have the freedom to marry gay people if they want to, and that it's denying their freedom, and that no one's going to make their church recognize those unions.
Do you know the clerk of Prince William County, Michelle McQuigg, who took on this burden for the side that's losing, and she's the one that's fighting along with the conservative organization?
Yes, I served with her in the House of Delegates a number of years ago before she ran for clerk of the court in Prince William, and I know her ideology, but it's still disappointing that she wants to stand in the path of freedom. And it was Jefferson who said that laws and institutions have to evolve with the progress of the human mind. And I can think of nothing better no better argument for marriage equality.
Earlier this summer, Governor McAuliffe directed the Commonwealth Secretary of Health to present him a list of options he could consider to expand Medicaid in Virginia without the approval of the General Assembly. Republicans who now control both chambers have drawn a line in the sand on this issue. What are you hoping the governor is going to do in the weeks ahead?
I'm waiting to see. I think that the Republicans in the Senate have not drawn a line in the sand. We had Republican votes for a Republican proposal for a Marketplace Virginia plan that would provide health care expansion. It's the House that's been the problem. I don't know if the governor is going to be able to do what we'd like, which is to cover the 400,000 Virginians who would be covered with federal funds, who are largely working poor people, and some of them are even veterans.
What are your expectations for the special session slated for next month?
Well, I am not terribly optimistic. I think that we could just be going through the motions. The speaker told me yesterday that he would anticipate that there would be some sort of a House bill that's sent directly to the floor for debate, which is interesting because it means that it would come through a committee that wouldn't really work on the bill, and that there'd be amendments to the bill on the floor perhaps offered. But the House has voted against Medicaid expansion before, and their main argument that the conservatives use is that it's hard to overcome the fear of the federal government, their misguided fear that they won't live up to their commitments. And we know that in the cases of Medicare and Medicaid, that they have kept their commitments to the public and to the states for their share of the funding.
Do you think this is just a matter of time that Virginia will see other states reaping billions of dollars in Medicaid funding that Virginia is turning its back to, just as a matter of time. When other states do it and the federal government doesn't come in and swoop in and take over the program?
I hope so, but with the nature of the current House of Delegates, it's hard for me to see this. But elections change over time. Legislatures change over time with people expressing their will. The problem is that we have a very gerrymandered House of Delegates where people feel more beholden to the Tea Party than the public at large because of fear of losing primary.
So speaking of your gerrymandered district, I was looking at your district, and are you worried at all about the development across the river at National Harbor from Alexandria's point of view? With the casino moving in, and Virginia's a right.
We only have
state.
about 20 seconds.
I'm not terribly worried. No, I think we have a bridge that will withstand the traffic.
Okay.
Adam Eben, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Senator Eben is a Democrat who represents the Commonwealth's 30th District, which includes parts of Alexandria, Arlington, and Fairfax, Virginia. Tom, we did not get the opportunity to talk about Mayor Gray adopting the school boundaries plan, but we're going to have a segment on that on the Kojo Nnamdi show next week.
It's just out. It's a big deal about the tens of thousands of parents worried.
And no political risk for him. But of course, today is the day when they opened Chuck Brown Park in Northeast Washington. So we go out today with music of the legendary Chuck Brown.
Respect him.
Tom Sherwood, he's our resident analyst and reporter for Channel 4 and columnist for the current newspapers. Always a pleasure.
Have a good week.
Thank you all for listening. I'm Kojo Nnamdi.